Oscar Beasley. One of my favorite things here about working at the Senior Center is that we have so many members with so much talent, expertise, and they network with each other and talk about things that they enjoy. And then various people, like Ed here in the front row, will come up to me and say, oh, Oscar needs to do a program here at the Senior Center and talk about hiking. And from my perspective, I'm an avid cyclist myself, so I was all about it. And it's something that I really enjoy doing, and I'm really happy when I see someone who has made a life of it. And so this is Oscar's story, so I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to him so he can tell you a little bit more about himself and his life biking. So thank you, Oscar.
Well, thanks for showing up. I was talking to Ruth here about what I was going to talk about, and I reflected back on a patient of mine years early in my practice. His name was Art Cahill. He was a lawyer in Iowa City, an old-timer from Oxford, an Irishman. And he'd come in for a checkup, and I'd walk into the room and say, well, how are you doing, Mr. Cahill? And his invariable response was always the same thing. Well, doctor, much better than I deserve. And I feel that way about this audience today. Thanks for being here. It's easy to talk about yourself, and that's what I'm going to do today. I've given this talk before, so when I first started, Obama was our president, and his wife was, her big program was an attack on childhood obesity, and certainly the exercise is a part of that program. Next one, please. Now, I wrote a book on this about 10 years ago, and I dug into what is it about exercise that's good for you? How does it work? And so I did some reading, stuff that I never learned in medical school for sure, about exercise physiology. Now these graphs come from the following thoughts. I had 4 daughters who were into horseback riding. They stabled the horses out at Sugar Bottom Stable, which is no longer in existence. But I'd sit there very bored watching one of the horse shows, and next to me was a fellow physician. And we were just chatting about this and that and the other, and I got on the subject of polo ponies. Didn't know much about it. I'd never seen a polo game, but I knew that these rich men who rode polos as a sport could afford any horse they wanted. But I also learned that they chose usually horses that were 15, 18, even 20 years of age, which is near the life expectancy of a horse. And so the idea came to mind, and I shared it with my fellow physician, that these animals are kept vigorously active throughout their lives. They're not allowed to just become sedentary, and they go hard, and they keep that up until the end of their natural life, and then they go down fast and they die. My thought was, well, this surely applies to other mammals as well. And so I kept this in mind over the years. And then I was on a bike tour, happened to be in France. And I got to talking to a gentleman that I met from Connecticut there, and I said, you know, I think this is the way exercise works. So I drew on a napkin what you see right here. At the top is my presumption about American life. You peak when you get to be about 25 years of age in your performance. And then if you remain sedentary, you just go steadily, gradually downhill until you conk out at about 80-something. Now, by contrast, peak at 25, but stay vigorously active, and the downslope is much more gradual. But you too, you'll reach the end of the line somewhere and you'll go down fast. Well, this man said, that's amazing. I just read this book about the same thing, and said, I'll send you a copy. The name of the book was, see, I guess the next slide, was Younger Next Year. Well, it turns out that Chris Crowley I guess he still is, this is 10 years ago, a New York City internist. Same role that I performed in Iowa City, general internal medicine. He wrote the book with this same theory in it, but he had the good fortune of having a good friend, Henry Lodge, who was a retired lawyer. They're getting reversed?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, yeah. And the lawyer is very humorous and very clever at writing, and he put into humorous anecdote the theory that he had about the value of persistent, vigorous exercise. Next one. Well, this is me when I first got they used to call them 10-speed bikes, and it had instead of a little clicker thing that Schwinn used, this is a French thing that they've used in France for years, where you shift it with a thing called a derailleur. That's my first time. I own no helmet, no trunks for bicycling, nothing special. My first attack at it. And this came to mind. That was 45 years ago. So Monday was my actual 90th birthday this week. Right after that, that was January, and then in March, I rode out of town for the first time. I rode to Riverside, Iowa. And I had friends there, and by the name of Figgins, who ran a motorcycle shop. I rode a motorcycle for a little while. And I rode up to the shop there, and Jim came out and said, "What are you doing on that underpowered vehicle?" He was very much right. I learned a lesson that day. I'd gone there straight south, if you remember Riverside, with a north wind. My wife and I had an appointment at 5 o'clock that Saturday afternoon, and I didn't make it. The north wind really taught me a lesson. I'm trying to get back to Iowa City. Okay, now, this has really got me started. I subscribe to the Bicycling magazine. That's the name of it, Bicycling, just one word. And the first issue I received was this man's diary for like May, June, and July. It was 3 segments, verbatim. Foxy Grandpa, 3,400 miles in 34 days. He rode from his home in Vacaville, California, to Quebec City, Quebec, solo, and 100 miles a day. And the punch was, he was 70 years old at the time. I mean, I thought, 70 years old, you're done with that, aren't you? So I thought, oh, this is okay. And for the next one, what really got me started was my partner in my medical practice was Karl Larsen. Karl's dead now. But Karl and I lived close together, and when the oil crisis hit in 1973, the first Arab oil crisis, Karl said, "Oh, see, why don't we just bicycle over to Mercy Hospital?" Oh, I said, "Karl, I'm 45 years of age." I welcome his immediate negation of that comment, and got the old Schwinn down, dusted it off, up to the tires, and he and I both started riding over to Mercy Hospital, and then out to Town Crest to our office. And that went pretty good. Of course, it was only 5 miles for the whole thing. But anyway, I got into, as I said, I got that 10-speed bike and started riding it. And then I was getting better at it all the time, and then I said to my wife, I'm going to ride to my hometown, which is Paducah, Kentucky. 456 miles. I remember exactly the distance. Well, she was opposed to this, thought I was nuts, but then I got some help from the newspaper. Dr. Herman Fawcetti was a well-known cardiologist over at the university hospitals. And he just participated in that race in France from Paris over to Brest on the coast and back, and got a lot of attention. She backed off, and came October, I remember it very well, October 12th, Columbus Day, I started out. Now, the good news is I had a tailwind. And to my absolute surprise, I made 150 miles the first day. Wow. And I got to Paducah in 4 days. I was sold on it. And that's when my serious cycling really began. This is on the trip to Paducah. I owned no helmet, no cycling trunks. I'm wearing the shoes I went to work in, leather. But I made it, and the bus, I took it back up, shipped the bike back. There's my notes I kept in my pocket. I wrote down the stuff I took with me. I weighed 170 pounds, and the bike and me together weighed 228. And of course, I still have, I wrote up today on that old Schwinn. It's indestructible, but it also weighs a ton. So that was the beginning of the long distance stuff. Next one. I got to cut this down or I'll take all afternoon. Karl and I did some trips, but then my first big one was I flew over to the UK, and I bought the ticket to the northernmost point of Scotland, which is called Wick, W-I-C-K, and I rode it back to London. And I kept a little tripod so I could take my own pictures from time to time, and that's how I got this picture of me somewhere in Scotland. Okay, then Karl and I together, about a year later, flew out to Seattle, and we biked back to, we meant to get to Iowa City, but we ran out of time, we had to be back at work, and we made it to Sioux City. Great trip. Okay, next one. And then a year later, we went to Alaska, and let me say just one thing here. If you haven't been there, you miss one of the most beautiful places you can ever go to. We rode, we flew up to Anchorage. We rode up through the famous park. It used to be called McKinley, now it's called Denali. Then we got sick with a gastroenteritis, so we got slowed down and we took the train all the way up to Fairbanks, because we had a ferry to catch a week later. And then we came down right beside the pipeline, which was brand new, to Valdez, is where the ferries pick up the oil and where the horrible crash occurred. Everybody knows about that. And anyway, to shorten this up, it did exactly what we thought it would do. It rained half the time. But this is the beautiful part, right? We had these several wonderful days going south with the sun out. You see how warm it is. He's got no jacket on. Great trip. I highly recommend it. Okay, we're up to 1981, and I'd already ridden to Galesburg once, so I'm going to cut this a little short. In those days, every day I missed a day's pay, so I shortened the trip. So my girls took me over to Galesburg, and I took off for Washington, D.C. Now, the woman who picked me up, as I see her in the audience right now, she's sitting over there, the second row there. That was one of the hardest trips I ever made. And the reason is that the wind was against me, and those Appalachian hills are worse than the Rockies. Anyway, I made it, and I met Donald Karl. Did anybody know Donald Karl? Yep. He interviewed me there at the Smithsonian. an article for the Register for me. In those days, you could ride up to the White House. There was no, Pennsylvania Avenue was wide open, and under that current stuff. Then my son John, who's on the right there, did some trips with me. This was before he was married. The other youngster is Whitey Piro's youngest son, Andy Piro. So we, how was that? Oh yeah, Julie there and with us drove us up to, trying to think, Thunder Bay, Thunder Bay, Ontario, and left the three of us there, and we rode back to Iowa City. But on our last day, we stopped just before we crossed the Iowa border, and we found Mac's lunch available for breakfast. And we were hungry as pigs. We'd ridden 25 miles that morning. Mrs. Mac was a poor little widow woman. Her husband, Mac, was dead, and she was still trying to run the restaurant. And these two guys walked in there, and all her friends were having breakfast there, and they jumped up. They saw she was a guest, knowing that they would want a huge amount of quantity. We'll help you. We'll help you if they don't want. And they did. And they ordered, these boys ordered double orders of everything. And then we gave us a bill. You guys can't be right. You got double. I paid the double. Now step outside for us. We want to take a picture of you. And that's Mac. The kids still talk about Mrs. Mac. My second oldest child wound up in New Orleans, where she taught, this is right after the Vietnam War, she taught Vietnamese immigrants English in a community college. She needed something of common interest to talk to them about so they could practice their English. To make it simple, she said to them, my father will ride his bicycle from Chicago to New Orleans. And she gave it time to sink in. And one bright little lady on the back row stuck up her hand. Yes? Does he not have car? It's one of the easiest trips I ever made. One factor, northwest wind. 150 miles in one day. Great trip. My nose is white because I was getting so sunburned I put zinc oxide on it. Next one. Here the same group is again, let's see where we go. We went from Door County, Wisconsin to Iowa City. Julie, did you drive us up there? I can't remember.
Neither can I, probably though.
That went just fine. Go ahead to the next one now. And then my father was in the monument business, and I'm from Kentucky, as I already said. And we had a cousin living in Lexington, Kentucky, so John and I decided to ride to Lexington. I think that's the right trip. Yeah, that's it. And it was a hot August day, but again, we were lucky. The wind was with us, and we made 168 miles that day, winding up south of Peoria. I couldn't think of the name of the place now. Pekin, yeah, Pekin. That's the Holiday Inn in Texas now. And Dad bought this limestone for some of his monuments and his cemetery curving from Indiana. Bedford, Indiana is famous. Now, if you remember 30 years ago, there was a very famous movie out called Breaking Away. The Cutters, which are the poor boys that worked in the quarries, who raced the rich boys who belonged to the fraternities at Indiana University. Of course, the Cutters won. It was a happy ending. And this is where it all started from. So this is of interest to me personally, Indiana limestone. Incidentally, the Empire State Building was constructed entirely out of one excavation of Bedford limestone. All for the same single excavation. Excellent. We crossed the river at, forgot the name of the little town, wonderful little town, into Kentucky, and had a lovely ride from a forested area down to Frankfurt. And I'll never forget that. Something very unpleasant happened. The dog chased us, and this dog will do. And then he gave up, he didn't look, and he ran in front of a truck. Always a bad memory. So much for that. This is my, I think the professors call it my opus magnum. This is my 1,700-mile ride, like the guy I showed you earlier from California, the old guy. I rode from LA back to Kansas City, where my oldest daughter was living. And I'm going across, I think it's Arizona there, northern Arizona. And a German couple stopped. I got him to take my picture. He did a good job. He really nailed it. And I got back to Kansas City, as I said, in 17 days. I lost 15 pounds. Now, if you haven't driven California Highway 1, in my opinion, you missed the most beautiful drive in the United States, or anything in the world that I've seen. I took Andy and my son John, we flew out to San Francisco, and we simply rode down Highway 1 along the coast to LA. Absolutely beautiful. And that is the famous newspaper guy,
Hearst?
Yeah, Hearst, that castle there, I thought it'd be a tourist trap. It's not, it's an art museum. It's a beautiful place. It was really, and people were so nice to get out in California. There were no horns blown at us. There were no trucks on the road. The speed limit was 50 for cars. Had a great time. We made it a day ahead of the time we planned back in those days, 1984. Got into LA, rode right up to the counter, and I said to the lady, I said, is there any way we could go a day earlier? Well, we've got a ticket for tomorrow. She said, how long does it take to take those pedals off? I said, about 5 minutes. You're on. I rode on no boxing, no nothing. It was easy in those days. Not anymore. This daughter who was in New Orleans moved to Dallas. She married a gentleman from there, and so we drove down there, and one of my daughters, not this one, drove me down to Dallas. And John and I rode back to Kansas City, where the oldest girl lived. And it was a great ride. It was hot. We did fine. Okay, we're getting near the end of this touring stuff. In '85, I rode to Boston. Now, the story about Cleveland is this. My biggest fear of that ride was Chicago. I mean, it's bad enough driving through here. But I sweated that. But when I got to the outskirts of Chicago, I asked the policeman the best way to go, and he told me it was very good advice. I forget the name of that straight road, something way, an Indian name. But anyway, I went just as fast as I could and stood up on the pedals and tried to make all the green lights. What happened was I flared up my quadriceps tendon in my left knee, and I knew that was a possibility. So when I finally got through there, and I did okay, and nobody hit me, and I got it okay, and I ran into a truck driver, and I said, I've got to get around Cleveland some way, and not sure what to do. I've got a sore knee. And he said, well, you got two choices. You can go around there and you can face the hills, or you can go through the city and it's flat. Well, I picked the city. I was afraid of that knee, and actually turned out fine. No problem. Got lots of stoplights, but I made it through just fine. Got to Boston is when I expected to. Getting near the end now. I'd never been to Florida. So I divided that whole trip from Iowa City to the tip of Florida into 3 sections. I've already told you I rode to Paducah, Kentucky. So I drove down to Paducah and I rode to Tallahassee that year. Go to the next one now. And I don't even know what this is, I've forgotten. Oh, somebody in Cedar Rapids took my picture and put it in the Gazette. That's kind of out of order. I'll go to the next one now. And then in '87, I drove with one of my daughters down to Tallahassee, and I rode the rest of the way to the Marco Island on the west coast, and the further south we can go. So that put me eventually, and I've gone from the United States from corner to corner, so to speak. Well, then I got off track. I was raised in Kentucky. My children are all born here, knew nothing about our history, family history. I got into genealogy, and I spent a decade gathering all that information and so on. And I pretty gave up bicycling except for just commuting locally. So I went a decade without any big, exciting long trips until 1997. And then I was semi-retired, and by that I mean I quit hospital practice and just did office practice. So I started taking trips with tours. This is the Elderhostel group. They used to call it that. Now they changed it to the Road Scholar, ROAD. And my first trip was the Loire Valley of France. I'm the one on the far right. You're right. And we just got through seeing all the beautiful castles, and I took a group picture. Very nice. I've since backed away from Elderhostel. They're very strict, lots of rules, and a little bit annoying. I had a little dog that I was crazy about. She weighed 9 pounds. She fit precisely into that nylon pannier on the front of the bike, and I used to ride her around town. So one of the photographers, this happened to be from the Cedar Rapids Gazette, caught a picture of it and put it in the paper again. Purely accidental. Okay, following the French trip, I took another one with the Elderhostel, and this one was, incidentally, the Elderhostel makes it easy for you. They always put their trips along the flattest course that they can have. They put it along the rivers. Half of this trip was along the Po River in northern Italy. And the second half, they bust us over the Alps to the Brenner Pass to Austria, and we rode along another river. I think it's called Salzach, the best I can remember. S-A-L-Z-A-C-H. I liked Austria. It was beautiful. And on my own in 2000, I'd never really been to Texas, so I drove down to Austin, and when I went to a Elderhostel course on classical music at the University of Texas. But I went 3 days ahead of time because I wanted to see this Lyndon Johnson stuff, and I did. It took a 3-day ride on my own through what they call the hill country. In the spring of the year, it was very, I think April, yeah, it is April. The flowers were lovely. In France, I met Tom Tily, a gentleman who retired from the insurance business. He lived in San Juan, California, a lovely wife. And I called Tom and asked him if he'd be interested in touring the San Juan Islands off the coast of Washington. He was, and we joined each other there, and had a nice trip, although I'm not big on the San Juan Islands. I like to throw that in. But Tom became a good friend, and he subsequently came to Iowa and rode ragbri, and also came on another occasion to hunt pheasant. He's 93 now. Unfortunately, he's in the early phases of Alzheimer's. Still plays tennis. When I retired in 2002, my clinic partners gave me an upscale bike tour of the Oregon coast. It was great. I enjoyed it. Beautiful. But that wasn't the best part. Turned out that I had an extra day before my flight back to Iowa. So I was in Portland, and I just rented a bicycle, an ordinary, probably not even a shift gear, bicycle from a shop there in the center of town. And I spent the day just touring the city, going back and forth across all those bridges. And I guess a photographer's paradise. I just loved it. And more comes later with regard to that comment about Portland. It made me interested in touring cities, which is a good way to see cities, and I'll follow up on that one next week. About that time, a lady named Vicki Curran, who worked for doctors in Iowa City all her life, but particularly this time in her clinic, Vicki put me on to Bike and the Like, a couple from Baltimore who run a biking tour group. My first trip with them was Cape Cod, and we saw all these expensive, luxurious places at a very nominal cost, thanks to the good planning of this lady who ran the thing. This one is in that, is it Nantucket? Yeah, Nantucket. Very expensive place, but we took it all in, enjoyed it, and very economically. On that same trip, I stopped in New York City where my daughter and her family lived, and this is my son-in-law and my two grandsons. Well, just one of them, just the older grandson. We rode across the Brooklyn Bridge, and I had her picture taken on the Brooklyn side of the bridge. So I rode in a big apple. It was an experience for this country doctor from Iowa. Okay, 2007. This is the story. I got a hold of the same tour company that Elderhostel hired for their tours. I thought, well, that'd be a good outfit. So they said, well, okay, we recommend that you go to Panama Peak in Panama City. And then I found out he was supposed to be a crook and didn't know what to do. And I wavered back and forth and didn't have much alternative, so, well, I'm going to try him. Well, it turned out great. I took an Elderhostel course in Mexico City on something, I even forgot the subject, park or something. And when I got done with that, I flew down to Panama, and Pete runs this business. He's got about 15 employees, but he met me himself at the airport, drove me to my hotel, which is a good ways away, and I said, Pete, I want to ride across the peninsula. I want to say that I rode from ocean to ocean. He says, thought I meant it. And I'll make you a proposition you can't refuse. What is it? He says, I'll take you across to the Atlantic side. I was staying on the Pacific side. And ride with you across the island, and I'll have one of my men escort us for safety's sake. $150. I said, sold. Maybe it's 200. It was right, it was under 200. And that's what he did. Picked me up in a brand new Nissan Pathfinder, what do you call it, SUV. Drove me over to the Atlantic side. Had two brand new Trek bicycles. We got on there. What I wanted to do was ride along the canal and take pictures of those sedentary tourists down there on the going to the lock. Well, that's impossible. The road doesn't run that close to the. Anyway, I see why the French failed. That's really a mountain that they had to cut through. And we began at 8 o'clock in the morning, and I was just about shot. Now this was March. I wasn't in any great condition yet. But I never heard of these caffeine-loaded drinks. What do you call them? Yeah, he had a case full of all kinds of stuff. Hey, drink this, Doc. You'll feel good. And I made it. So did he. This guy was a wrestler, born to Cuban parents in Florida. They had escaped from Castro. Educated in American University. He was a male nurse. He was a wrestler. He wrestled in one contest. Who was our great coach here? Is still out of it. Yeah, Gable. He worked under him in a training session. Anyway, he knew immediately about Iowa. Spoke perfect English. I mean, you couldn't tell he was Cuban. So when we got near the hotel on the Pacific side, my hotel, he got on his, they called them Blackberries in those days, and he called his secretary and said, I want you to meet me at the hotel. So when I got there, they had this big sign, ocean. Now things are cheap there. If you haven't been down there, at least they were then. I guess it's a good time. I took another trip with him the next day, trip to the, what do you call it, rainforest. And I had such a guy, Piro, to get all your gang together, I'm going to buy you supper tonight. And we had probably 12 people. Guess in the bill, something like $110. Good restaurant. Good place to go. Okay, I went back to Bike and the Like, the couple out of Baltimore, and they did a tour of Northern California, the Napa Valley. I went 3 days ahead of time, and I bike toured the city of San Francisco. I did just great. Got over to Berkeley, got down to Stanford, saw all the famous universities, and a great time on my own before the actual tour started. Next. And that same year, 2007 was a busy year. I signed up with Elderhostel once again. This time I flew over to Gothenburg, I don't know how you pronounce it there. And you see the path we took. Again, they picked the flattest routes all along the water, so it's really breezy. And we wound up at Stockholm. That's fine. It's good enough. This is a guy a little bit younger than I, not very much. But I really like this man. He's from Rochester, New York. He's a native of West Virginia, but he moved there to work for Xerox. And he and I we're proud of our one day in Canada, because we were the only two to finish an 87-mile ride through the Algonquin National Park. And so the subsequent year, I got Bill to be my roommate when we went to Spain. Nice man. I subsequently spent a weekend with he and his wife in Rochester, and he showed me it's a beautiful city, incidentally, Rochester, New York. So the next year, 2008, I went with Bike and the Like, the Baltimore couple, to Spain. Best trip I ever made with them, and I'll tell you why it was best. It was all ad lib. They didn't know their way around. They had continual mess-ups, but we worked through them all and just have a great time. This is the very spot from which Columbus sailed to America in 1492. This river is where the boat lived. Let's see, where is this at? This is on the main coast of this same group. Jim Rice is a guy that works for NASA in Huntsville, Alabama. He was assigned to be my roommate. He became a friend of mine. Heard from him this week. Okay, next one. Okay, went back to Bike and the Like again. The intention was to ride a boat down the canal from Ghent, Belgium, to Paris. Well, we're in France. So the dock workers went on strike. And it messed up everything. Susie, that's the lady who ran the show, had it all planned, but we couldn't follow that plan. So we went back up into Holland. Cold as ice and windy. But to make a long story short, we eventually made it to Paris. And I've become friends with Earl Rust. He's a P&G engineer, been to Iowa City many times on business, and a guy that everybody liked. And Earl and I had an agreement to stay in Paris a few days and look over the city. And this is where I became acquainted with the Fat Tire Bicycle Company, which is now represented in all the big cities in Europe. So we rented bikes from them. Take it back. We were beginning a tour with them. And it was run by young Americans, guys in their 20s. And I remember the first trip, now there's 20 of us. Just get behind me and stay in line, the traffic will get out of your way. And that's exactly what happened. We liked it so well, we came back the next day and did it again. On that same trip is where I met the gentleman from Connecticut. I wrote on a napkin about how exercise improves your physical performance late in life. And he sent me the book the next week or two. Then I showed you the picture of younger next year. Earl and I have remained good friends, and he's been to Iowa City to visit me several times. Came for my birthday last week. Next week. I had never done this, although I've been there on a motorcycle. I don't know why it got me. Oh yeah, a lady here, Mary Palmbrook, gave me the idea. I took the train out to
Whitefish.
Yeah, Whitefish.
Yellowstone.
Right at the far side, the west side of Elderhostel. I took my bike with the lowest gears. It's the touring bike. So I'd have a 25-inch low speed, and I did it alone. And the idea was to ride the highway to the sun. I was about 85 years of age, and I was going to see if I could do it, and I did. Only thing is, I went pretty late in the season, and they told me during Whitefish it may snow. Yeah, it didn't look good. I got across there, took a motel on this side, the east side. Woke up the next morning. Everything was white. The lucky part was the train stopped there and would accept luggage here. The train came straight home. Next one. Just shortly thereafter, Jim Ridenour, who worked for AAA here for years, and is a bicyclist, had accidentally run into Dr. Streeter Shining in South Dakota. Streeter took the same residency I did here at Iowa, but he was about 7 or 8 years behind me. He went into practice at Rapid City, had a great career, and Jim Ridenour put me in touch with Streeter. I knew him by name, but really didn't know him personally. And we got acquainted through emails, and he invited me to come out there and ride with him. So I drove out there in 2011 and stayed with he and his wife in a lovely home, and we took tours out of Rapid City. Went to the Badlands with a bunch of his friends. He had a great bevy of followers. He was the senior guy amongst them. He had anesthesiologists and various people that worked at his hospital, and they were all bicyclists. So we would go from place to place and have about 5 days of wonderful visiting bicycling. Okay, I went back to the Bike and the Light group again, and Vicki went, she's from Iowa City, she went with me that time, and we the Berkshire Mountains, I wouldn't call them mountains, but that's they we had a nice tour there with them. This beautiful time of year, it was a very nice trip. And then, by then, we sort of formed a splinter group from this big group developed. And 6 of us, we kind of Piro. We were with the main group, I forgot that. We went ahead of time, we went to London, fat tire bicycle coming in. We toured London using this kind of conveyance. And that was my first experience with Airbnb. We had this luxurious apartment overlooking the Thames. There was 4 of us that paid the rent. It was remarkably economical. Next. And the main trip was to go to Croatia. We went from London to Croatia, and we rode down the coast area. It was very difficult, and I'll confess to you, I rode in a sag wagon a good bit of the way. It was really tough. But at the end, we have some easy rides, and here's one of them right here. Now, among that group, several of us kind of formed a small group of about 5 or 6 people. 2 of the people happened to be ladies who were from Portland. And Ruth, the older of the 2, invited us to come out to visit her and the other lady in the city of Portland. Well, I was the only one to get free. And I went out and I had a great time, and I love Portland. It's the most bike-friendly city I've ever seen anywhere in the world. This is their university hospital right here. Also an excellent academic institution. Excellent training. Let's see where we're at. Well, this is the same. Okay, the follow-up to that was we got the whole group together about 6 or 7 months later, and we went out to Portland, and we also drove up to Seattle and Vancouver, which is my first time to see those places. Next. Turns out, just by pure accident, that okay, this is the Finger Lakes, right? That's the okay. The 3 of us found out that we all graduated from the University of Kentucky. I had never heard of any of them before, but I was the oldest. But anyway, all 3 graduates, so that we had them take a picture. That was at the end of the Finger Lake ride, which was supposed to include our Cornell University. Yeah, Ithaca. Something went wrong and we couldn't go there for those reasons. Okay, a year ago, same group, Mike and the Light, offered a trip to Europe. And they were supposed to ride from Berlin through Czechoslovakia and end up in Krakow, Poland. I didn't do very well. I've injured my right knee, and I just couldn't do I rode the sag wagon most of the way. This funny thing happened there. The driver of the van was a kid named Lynch. Spoke excellent English. He was from South America, as I remember. But anyway, he asked me, "Do you know a Dr. Eckhart Ziegler in Iowa City?" Cellist. He's my father-in-law. So I spent the most of that ride with him. Okay, this is this year. We departed from our bike and the light group and went. Some of you may have ridden with a pedal across Wisconsin group. They're office in Evanston, Illinois, and I highly recommend them. We had a great trip up there this fall. Earl was supposed to be there, but he's from Florida and he got wiped out by hurricane. Yeah. So nevertheless, it was a great week, and we're going to do it again this coming summer. I marked the map. These are parts of the United States, not including Alaska, that I have ridden. Next one. I've either ridden through en route somewhere else, or specifically toured these cities. I love taking pictures, and I would argue that there's no better way to photograph scenery and sightseeing things than on a bicycle. You can stop anywhere you want, drive on the sidewalk. Bike pannier is an excellent place to carry a camera.
I don't see Seville.
I mean, that's it.
I don't see Seville on your list there. I don't see Seville on your list.
Well, it wasn't a big enough city either of this. I didn't.
Oh, okay.
Very great. Best meal I ever in my life.
Yeah, I can believe it.
It's fantastic. That's the end.
I'm told that the state of Washington is the most bike-friendly state in the nation. Have you had any experience riding in Washington State?
Well, my very first long trip, 1978, with Karl Larsen, was from Seattle back to Sioux City, Iowa. And we had to go through, you know, the airport there is between two cities, between Tacoma and Seattle. So we had to ride through the city. I confess to you, I was new at it, I was nervous, we didn't pay much attention to the scenery. We got out of there as fast as we could, and got out into the country, and we rode US 2, which is the northernmost US highway running across the Iowa. Rode that across the state of Washington to Spokane. And so I have not toured Seattle by bicycle.
I'm going to make note that you said your birthday was Monday, which was your 90th, and about a month ago you rode 90 miles.
Well, tell them how that
Yeah, I gave up doing it on my birthday because the weather was usually miserable by the 27th of November. This year was an exception.
Did you do it again?
Yeah, next year.
Did you ride Monday on your birthday?
Yeah, I rode that's another story, but good. I told you that I rode out of town for the first time to Washington, Iowa, and he says, "What are you doing here on that underpowered vehicle?"
Yes.
So Monday I went down there again, rode it down there.
You rode
The
Washington.
jail was still there. Greeted with open arms. My brother was there. We got a great talk. I'll send you a movie. I'll make a video.
You rode that? You rode that?
Yep. But no, it was great. Monday was a wonderful day.
How many miles there?
Well, I got lost down there. I know 38 miles. Yeah, there.
So do you have any idea of the total miles you've done on all of this?
Everybody asks me that, and I don't know.
I have another, no serious injuries ever, or? really?
Yeah.
No, been awfully lucky.
Wow,
Never broke a bone. Never been hit. No, lucky.
that's great.
I think I said to somebody, gentleman I just met, Noise, down here, that I think that, no, it wasn't, I met another gentleman, that the biggest issue nowadays is this texting stuff,
Exactly.
because they're not looking.
Yeah.
But, I mean, if they're going down a straight road with a yellow shirt on, I don't believe it's going to be drunk enough or doped enough to hit you. I mean, if they, I think that they have to be distracted if they're going to hit you on something. Intersections is another matter. But that's my move. Yes, sir.
I've ridden Ragbri, and I recall passing a woman that was texting while riding her bicycle.
Most things are addictive. I don't ride home. I don't even have it with me.
Question.
Yes, sir.
Your first serious bicycle was a Schwinn Latour, correct? Was it-
That's exactly right. That's the first one that Lee Novotny got in to sell down there. Yeah.
Yeah, 10 speed. How many years did you ride that? It looked like you had a yellow frame bicycle for many, was that your first?
You're exactly correct. I kept that one about a year, and then he came out with the Sports Tour, which was the most expensive Schwinn made, except for their Paramount, which was handmade by these two ladies in Chicago. That was their premium. I never owned one of them. But out in front here is my Sports Tour. I had 4 of them. I left one in England, but I didn't want to transport it back. I gave it to friends there. I gave one to my son. I gave one to my daughter in Kansas City, and I kept the red one. It's out front right now. It's indestructible.
Are you going to be buried on your bicycle?
Well, no, I'm going to be cremated. It won't burn, I guarantee you.
So what's your daily biking? Do you pretty much bike every day?
Well, I live on the east side. I live on First Avenue. At what used to be the eastern edge of town. It's not anymore, but it's a neighborhood I'm familiar with. Lived there for years. So I try to not drive the car. So I go to the Hy-Vee for my groceries. I go right uptown to the library or the barber shop or the center. Or I need to go to the University Hospital. I ride wherever I can. I hate ramps. I just use it as my transportation, unless it's raining or if it's slick, I don't ride. It takes a little longer.
And that's enough exercise to be ready for these big trips?
Well, if it's good weather, I try to get 100 miles a weekend, which is 13 a day. But I won't be able to do that in January, perhaps December. But usually I'd get 100 miles a week by just riding over to, Scott's Corner, if you know where that is, or Riverside, or occasionally I'll go to Tipton or Muscatine. Thank you all very much for